Welcome all of you to this free webinar on UGC NET English offered by Professor Academy, Chennai. The title of the webinar, UGC NET English Starting from Scratch. We are going to discuss how you can start your preparation for UGC NET English from the beginning, step by step. Let's go to part 1 of this webinar. Choose the right source. So before you start your preparation for UGC NET English, you should have some reliable sources. Let's say history of English literature. For this topic, you can refer to any of these 3 books. Edward Albert's History of English Literature, Harry Blemeyer's A Short History of English Literature. Then third one, Roland Carter and John McRae's The Routledge History of Literature in English. All these 3 books are useful and they offer different points from different perspectives. So perhaps you can choose one book and start reading it. Maybe you can ask your friend to go for another book, maybe another friend for another book. And when you study in a group, you'll be able to cover all the points said by these 3 books or the authors in the book in a detailed manner. That can be one of your strategies to start your NET preparation. For literary forms and terms, we have M.H. Abrams' A Glossary of Literary Terms, now edited and expanded by Jeffrey Holt Hopham. Then we have Edward Quinn's A Dictionary of Literary and Thematic Terms. And the most significant book of all the 3 is J.A. Cudden's A Dictionary of Literary Terms and Literary Theory, now revised by M.A.R. Habib. So this is the one book that you should possess. So if you want to immediately look up a term in literature. Then let's go for literary groups and movements. We hardly have any book for this topic, but here is a book, Literary Movements for Students. It offers some insights into some of the major literary movements like Beat Generation, Existentialism, Magic Realism, Symbolism, Surrealism, Postmodernism, and so on. Then for language and literature, you can refer to this wonderful book by George Yule in its 7th edition, The Study of Language. You can also refer to Kristen Denham and Anne Lobach's Linguistics for Everyone, an Introduction. It's a very colorful book and it's reader friendly. You can start from the scratch, if you are interested in linguistics. Then for literary theory and criticism, you should begin with Peter Barry, his beginning theory. Then you can move on to Hans Burton's literary theory, the basics. And here is a glossary for literary theory by Julian Ulfries, Kenneth Womack, and Ruth Robbins. Key concepts in literary theory. It has almost all the major theoretical concepts, in a crisp manner with examples. Then for cultural studies, you can begin with Ziauddin Sardar and Borin van Loon, that book, Introducing Cultural Studies. Then you can go for Arthur Berger's Cultural Criticism, a primer of key terms. Then here is a reference book by Chris Parker, The Sage Dictionary of Cultural Studies. And finally, we have companions for English literature and world literature. For English literature, the most famous book edited by Margaret Drabble, The Oxford Companion to English Literature. It's a unique book. It has entries for all the major authors across the ages in British literature. And it also gives a gist of each and every work or all the major works by all the authors. And here is an encyclopedia, Gale Contextual Encyclopedia of World Literature in 4 volumes. This is unique in the sense we hardly have any book for world literature. And this book provides you with the introduction to major authors across the world and also to their works. Then we have a research methodology. You can use MLA Handbook 8th edition, and we also go for MLA Handbook 9th edition, the recent one. Once you have all these resources, what should you do? And that is part 2, exhaust the sources. So this is where the webinar starts, and this is where you have to pay attention. So once you have your resources, you have to start somewhere. And let's say we have a strategy. Ask yourself this question: what genre of literature do I like the most? Ask yourself this question. And you have to pick a genre: poetry, drama, novel, prose, linguistics, theory. So you can start with one of the genres. Maybe if you like novel, why don't you start with Victorian age? Maybe you can start reading about Dickens, or you can read about the Bronte sisters or George Eliot, or you can start with the linguistics, phonetics, morphology, and other things. Then you can also start with theory or structuralism, post-structuralism, new historism or new criticism. Then you can go on and on. Or if you like prose, maybe you can start with Wordsworth preface to lyrical ballads or Coleridge biographia literaria, or you can always go back to Bacon or Charles Lamb or Hazlitt. Or you can go for drama. You can begin with Elizabethan age with Shakespeare and others, university wits. Then you can come to George Bernard Shaw and other world playwrights. Or let's say you can also go to poetry. So for this webinar, let's choose poetry. So once you pick a genre, you have to read about that. So let's choose poetry. And here is a question for you. I will show you fear in a handful of dust. In which poem does the above line appear? Option A, W.B. Yeats' Easter 1916. B, G.M. Hopkins' The Wind Over. C, Ezra Pound's The Cantos. D, T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. It's a very famous line. I will show you fear in a handful of dust. Let's check out the answer. D, T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. So once you choose poetry or any other genre for that matter, you have to narrow down. Either you can go to Romantic age, Wordsworth, Coleridge, Byron, Shelley, Keats, or you can also begin with modern age with T.S. Eliot. So once you choose T.S. Eliot, you can go to the next step. So this is where you can begin. Tip number 1, revisit your UG and PG syllabus. Let's say there's a paper called Modernism and Postmodernism offered by Department of English, University of Madras in their 4th semester. We are not going to look at everything that is there. We are just going to look at the poetry part. First one, Ezra Pound, Hugh Sylvan Moberly. Then we have W.B. Yeats' Sailing to Byzantium, T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. Then the French symbolist poet Charles Baudelaire, The Flowers of Evil, which is considered his masterpiece. Then you have a poet from Chile, Pablo Neruda, his odes, one of his famous odes, Ode to a Large Tuna in the Market. Then you have a Mexican poet, Octavia Paz, Between Going and Coming. Why is this important to revisit your UG and PG syllabus? One, you are already familiar with the topic. Now that you are preparing for UGC NET, you have to have a different strategy. While you are doing your course, you might have studied in a different way. Now you have to study in a different way. And why we are looking at this? Because we are just verifying whether we are going in the right path. So once you choose modern poetry, and if you choose T.S. Eliot or any other author for that matter, this syllabus says, okay, we are going the right path. Okay, we have Ezra Pound, Yeats, and T.S. Eliot, and other major poets across the world. You can also look at your syllabus and verify. So once you come to this, and why is this important, this syllabus? Because when the question setters, set questions for UGC NET English, they have to rely on some solid sources. And this is one of the sources. In a sense, syllabus prescribed across colleges and universities in India. That can be the beginning for the question setters. So you can also start with your own syllabus, or you can also download syllabus offered by famous colleges and universities. Now, let's say we chose T.S. Eliot. Now we have to go for points. You have to gather points about a topic. So that's tip number 2. So whenever you consult a book regarding T.S. Eliot, the first thing you come across again and again and again is that 1922, the year The Wasteland was published, and that is his masterpiece. Or you can come across this 1948, the year he was awarded Nobel Prize in Literature. And 1927 is important because T.S. Eliot was an American author. He moved to England and he converted from Catholicism to Anglicanism, and he got his British citizenship in 1927. And this is how he describes himself. T.S. Eliot, classical in literature, royalist in politics, and Anglo-Catholic in religion. So once you get started, now you have to build upon the points you already have. So these are the points we have now. Let's build on those points. So how to do that? First, why don't you check out the sources? We have a lot of books now. So let's look up T.S. Eliot in Edward Albert's History of English Literature. So these are the points I'm just offering you. In the sense, there are a lot of points given by Edward Albert, but let's take two from Edward Albert. In 1923, T.S. Eliot began his career as editor of The Criterion. Later, he became a director of Faber and Faber, the publishers. So we have 2 points. He edited a journal called The Criterion, and he was a director of a publishing company called Faber and Faber. Fine. Then let's look up T.S. Eliot in another book, The Routledge History of Literature in English. And this book says, it quotes T.S. Eliot's words. T.S. Eliot said, "Immature poets borrow, mature poets steal. Bad poets deface what they take, and good poets make it into something better, or at least something different." Who knows, this might be a question. Maybe a question like, who said immature poets borrow, mature poets steal? And if you're aware of this, then you get a point. So this is how you start your preparation. So once you choose a topic, you gather points about the topic. Then you can also fall back on the reliable sources you have. So this is how you can build your points upon points. Let's say that must be this how. So again, we already know T.S. Eliot's Wasteland was published in 1922. Now we have to build on that. In the sense, T.S. Eliot's Wasteland was published in 1922 in his journal, in a journal edited by him, The Criterion. We already know that. The journal edited by T.S. Eliot, The Criterion. We also know 1922, the publication of Wasteland. Now we are connecting 2 points. Then on the other side, we also know that he was a director of a publishing company called Faber and Faber. And look at this book, T.S. Eliot's collection of poems, Old Possum's Book of Practical Cats, published by Faber and Faber. Now you can connect Faber and Faber and this book. And there is also another thing, important thing here. T.S. Eliot used a pseudonym called Old Possum. So that's the name of the title, Old Possum's Book of Practical Cats. Sometimes they may simply ask, whose collection is Old Possum's Book of Practical Cats? If you're aware, then it's T.S. Eliot. Or they may ask which poet used the pseudonym Old Possum. That's again T.S. Eliot. So now we are building on that, building on the Criterion, building on Faber and Faber. So we have Wasteland, we also have Old Possum's Book of Practical Cats. So what next? I would say go for the 1 to 10 formula. I often prescribe this method. What is this method? So once you start your preparation, definitely you will be gathering a lot of points. And definitely you will face this problem of plenty. What you should do? So you take a note and maybe 1 page for Eliot. So this is how you can say point number 1. The Wasteland was dedicated to Ezra Pound. This is another point. So we know Wasteland was published in Criterion in 1922. Now we are building on that. It was dedicated to the Imagist poet Ezra Pound, because Ezra Pound was the one who edited this poem. And now T.S. Eliot is dedicating this work to Ezra Pound, and he calls Ezra Pound in Latin Il Meglio Fabbro. What do you know? What does it mean? It means the better craftsman. So Ezra Pound is a better craftsman. So this is point number 1. Next, point number 2. So you can ask, how will I come across all these points? Simple. Once you get started, definitely, it will come to you. You just keep referring to the sources. It's like hyperlink. So once you check one point, it will lead you to another. It will lead you to another. What you have to do, you have to put everything together. For instance, point number 2, the title of Evelyn Waugh's novel, A Handful of Dust, was taken from The Wasteland. Now we are adding point to the previous point. Wasteland, 1922, The Criterion, Ezra Pound, now Evelyn Waugh, A Handful of Dust. And we have just looked at this famous quote. I will show you fear in a handful of dust. And now you can connect the quote with this title of the novel by Evelyn Waugh. Then point number 3. The title of the Nigerian novelist Chinua Achebe's No Longer at Ease was taken from T.S. Eliot's The Journey of the Magi. This is another one. We are all aware of Chinua Achebe and his famous book Things Fall Apart. And this is the second book, No Longer at Ease, whose title was taken from T.S. Eliot's The Journey of the Magi. Then point number 4. So if you refer T.S. Eliot, or if you look up T.S. Eliot in any book, any solid book, definitely there is a mention of his famous collection, 4 quartets. It is a set of 4 poems, Burnt Norton, East Cocker, The Dry Salvages, Little Gidding. Sometimes there were questions regarding this. They simply ask you which of the following is not one of the poems in 4 quartets. So if you are aware of this, then it's easy to answer this question. But is it enough? No, because they have already asked this question. They may go deep. So what you have to do? You have to collect points on Burnt Norton. And look at the cover. It was published by Faber and Faber, right? So this is one of the famous lines from Burnt Norton. Time present and time past are both perhaps present in time future, and time future contained in time past. So it talks about, the circular plot in life and connecting with time. Then you can go for point number 6. Now we are going for East Cocker. Here is a line. In order to arrive at what you don't know, you must go by a way which is the way of ignorance. A beautiful line. And this line perfectly describes one who is about to begin the preparation for UGC NET English. So if you think you are ignorant, I think you should use your ignorance as your investment. So in order to arrive at what you don't know, you must go by a way which is the way of ignorance. Beautiful line. You can connect yourself with this line if you are about to prepare. Then point number 7, this time from The Dry Salvages. The river is within us, the sea is all about us. So it is in this work he uses a lot of imagery related to water, and especially river and sea. Then point number 8, from Little Gidding. For last year's words belong to last year's language, and next year's words await new voice. Another beautiful lines. So whenever you come across these lines, you have to make a point. Now you have a lot about T.S. Eliot, and now it's easy because you're not just wandering on the surface. Little Gidding, in the sense 4 quartets. All the things under 4 quartets, and also some of the major lines, major quotes from those poems. So after this, what you have to connect? Perhaps say, here is another modernist writer. We have Virginia Woolf. Virginia Woolf made this statement in her famous essay, Mr. Bennet and Mrs. Brown. She said, I think that T.S. Eliot has written some of the loveliest single lines in modern poetry. We can agree with Virginia Woolf. Just now we have looked at some of the loveliest single lines in modern poetry by T.S. Eliot. And also pay attention to the cover. Virginia Woolf's Mr. Bennet and Mrs. Brown was published by the Hogarth Press. See, now you have to draw parallels. On the one hand, you have T.S. Eliot and Faber and Faber. On the other hand, you have Virginia Woolf, who founded her own press called the Hogarth Press with her husband, Leonard Woolf. So whenever you think of Virginia Woolf, you can think of the Hogarth Press. The Hogarth Press is still in contention. Now they are coming with a series called the Hogarth Shakespeare series. You can check out this series. The series is known for retelling Shakespeare's famous plays in the form of novels. And they invite famous novelists across the globe and they ask them to retell Shakespeare's play, a particular play, in the form of prose, in the form of novel. So you can check out that. Maybe that can be another point. So point number 10. So we are already aware of 1922, the publication of T.S. Eliot's Wasteland. Year is important. When it comes to net preparation, sometimes they ask the year, important year. And also sometimes you have to go for chronology. So you have to pay attention to some of the most important years. For instance, 1922, we have James Joyce Ulysses, we have T.H. Lawrence Aaron's Rod, and also Virginia Woolf's Jacob's Room. You can also come to a conclusion that the year 1922 is the starting point of modern poetry in Britain. So this is how you can start your preparation. Then we have this problem. Okay, should I go for point number 11? I would say no. So that's why I call this technique the 1 to 10 formula. So once you reach this point number 10, I would say go back to point number 1. Now you have to go for another topic. Maybe why not Virginia Woolf? Why don't you collect another 10 points about Virginia Woolf? Maybe Jacob's Room, Stream of Consciousness, or Dorothy Richardson. Another 10 points. Again, go for another 10 points. So that you have a lot of 10 points. So when you revise, it will be very easy for you to go through all these points again. So if you keep numbering, 11, 12, and 13, if you have 10,000 points, it is psychologically, it's a kind of a burden. It goes on and on. But if you have 1 to 10, 1 to 10, 1 to 10, it's easy for you to revise. And once you have all these points, what should you do? Tip number 3, work with a steady group. Why? Because I don't think you can, remember all these points if you don't revise. Of course, you will revise. So if you're comfortable with working alone, you can do that. Or you can form a steady group with the like-minded people, because don't start a group with people who are not interested in your adventure. So let's say you have few people, I would say around 5. Let's say 5 people who are interested in cracking NET in the next attempt. So let's say one member can say T.S. Eliot coined the term disassociation of sensibility, because our topic is T.S. Eliot, modern poetry. Because you might have missed out on this point, and a friend can point out this. A friend can say T.S. Eliot coined the term disassociation of sensibility. Maybe another friend, member 2, can say T.S. Eliot coined this term in The Metaphysical Poets in his essay published in 1921. But another thing, when you work with a steady group, don't just mug up things. You have to discuss. Okay, we are all aware T.S. Eliot coined the term disassociation of sensibility. But are you aware of its meaning? What does it mean, disassociation of sensibility? What is this term to do with the metaphysical poets? Then we know T.S. Eliot says the metaphysical poets like John Donne, Marvell, and Cowley, they had a sensibility called unification of sensibility. They had the ability to fuse, put things together, in the sense they are able to connect thought and feeling, right? But after modern age, starting with Milton and Dryden, that's how T.S. Eliot explains this term. After Dryden and Milton, something happened. Disassociation of sensibility. These writers didn't have the ability to connect or put together thought and feeling. So that is called disassociation of sensibility. They didn't have the sensibility to put things together. They started dividing thought, they started dividing feeling. They're not coming together. They are different, as if science and arts. So that's the division they are coming up with. But earlier, with the metaphysical poets and their metaphysical conceits, we are able to think, we are able to feel. So that's how he praises the metaphysical poets and criticizes Dryden and Milton with this term, disassociation of sensibility. So metaphysical poets known for their unification of sensibility. Milton and Dryden known for their dissociation of sensibility. Then you have to move on. Maybe someone say, hey, there's also another term used by T.S. Eliot, objective correlative, in his essay Hamlet and His Problems, 1919. But you should be cautious. Sometimes authors use the term, but they didn't coin it, because this term objective correlative was coined by Washington Alston. Maybe a friend can point that. So again, as I told you before, don't take things for granted. Don't stop yourself with this point. Okay, T.S. Eliot used the term objective correlative in his essay, Hamlet and His Problems. Now you have to check out this term, objective correlative. What does it mean? So that is the next step. Tip number 4, read the original. So if you're not aware of the term, and if you can't understand the term, either you can ask your professor, or you can check out, or you can look up that term, maybe let's say in Cutton's Dictionary of Literary Terms, or you can also go back to the original. So hardly we go for original, and that's where we lack certain things. So we should go for the original, because these days in NET exams, they give you a passage from the original text and they ask you to analyze. So if you don't know the context of the essay, I don't think you'll be able to crack that. So let's say Hamlet and His Problems. So what is the context of the term objective correlative? So in this book, T.S. Eliot made a claim. Hamlet, Shakespeare's Hamlet, is an artistic failure. So in order to understand this statement, you have to go further. And there is also another point, because if you read, you read anything written on this essay, generally they say Hamlet is an artistic failure, the statement made by T.S. Eliot. But they don't point out this topic or this statement. T.S. Eliot also said Coriolanus and Antony Cleopatra by Shakespeare are the most artistic success, most assured artistic success. So on the one hand, he says, T.S. Eliot says, Hamlet is an artistic failure. On the other hand, he says, Coriolanus and Antony and Cleopatra are artistic success. Then let's go. So another famous statement by T.S. Eliot, Hamlet is the Mona Lisa of literature. Why? It is tough to interpret Mona Lisa's smile. Similarly, it is tough to interpret Hamlet's madness and why he procrastinates, why he postpones taking revenge. And that is the puzzle we are yet to solve. So Hamlet is a Mona Lisa of literature. And it is in this context, he uses the term objective correlative. Now let's read the term in its context. The only way of expressing emotion in the form of art is by finding an objective correlative. In the very next sentence, T.S. Eliot gives a definition. Objective correlative is a set of objects, a situation, a chain of events, which shall be the formula of that particular emotion. Simple. He says if you want to convey a particular emotion in a work of art, you should have some external fields, external features through which you can convey that emotion to the reader or spectator. One, you should show some objects like a knife or a rose if you want to convey the idea of love, or revenge, knife. Or there should be a situation, Hamlet meeting his mother in a bedroom, or a chain of events. There should be a lot of events to understand a particular emotion. But the problem with Shakespeare's Hamlet, that's how T.S. Eliot says, Hamlet doesn't have objective correlative, and we are not able to understand his emotions, what's going in his mind. We do not have some external manifestation of his emotions. So that's where Hamlet lacks. And this is the context. So once you know, now it is easy to understand the term objective correlative. So you have to relate the objects and the emotion it tries to convey. So objects and emotions and the relationship between them. So if a work doesn't have this feature, then it's an artistic failure. And let's go for tip number 5. Have examples for concepts. Okay, fine. Objective correlative, we understand the concept. And we also know Hamlet is an artistic failure because it doesn't have objective correlative. But that is not an example. So you should have a perfect example for a concept. So whenever you prepare for NET exam, if you come across a term, you should have some solid examples. Let's see, in the same essay, T.S. Eliot provides us with a beautiful example. For objective correlative, we can have an example of Macbeth. So in Macbeth, how do we understand the guilt of Lady Macbeth? It's very simple, the famous scene, sleepwalking scene. And number two, we have some sensory impressions. She says, all the perfumes of Arabia cannot sweeten this little hand. For her, there is some blood stain on her hand, but it's not there. It's an illusion. It's psychological. And she says, all the perfumes of Arabia cannot sweeten this little hand. She's suffering from guilt. And it is expressed through this scene. It is expressed through her words and also words of Macbeth. So these are the external features through which we are able to connect, the external and the emotion it tries to convey. And this is objective correlative. And T.S. Eliot says, if a work has to be an artistic success, there should be artistic inevitability. It should be there, open. Complete adequacy of the external to the emotion. So here the external refers to the sleepwalking scene and her words, and also words of her husband Macbeth. And through these, the external, we are able to connect with her guilt, the emotion. That's what bothers her the most. Then she commits suicide, or she dies. Then this is precisely what is deficient in Hamlet. Now you know the entire concept and the essay. So this is how you have to read the original. Let's say we have arrived at a point where you have to move across genres. So you can begin your preparation with one genre, let's say poetry. That's what we have been discussing. We chose T.S. Eliot. We looked at some of the major points regarding T.S. Eliot and his works and modern poetry. Tip number 6, move across genres. Sometimes people are obsessed with one topic. They keep on preparing on that topic and they neglect other topics. So make sure whenever you prepare, maybe 1 day or 2 days for one topic, and you have to move on to the next. So why don't you go for drama or novel, prose, linguistics, or theory, and apply all the things we have seen so far. Maybe you choose novel. Why don't you go for Dickens or any other novelist in the world? And why don't you read about that author and collect points about the novels written by that author, so that you then go for point 1 to 10. Then why don't you consult the resources you have, then study it with a group, then move on to the next topic, prose. So it's for you to begin. Let's go for drama. So you can answer this question. Spot the wrongly matched playwright play pair. Option A, Badal Sarkar, Ivam Indrajit. B, Manjula Padmanabhan, Harvest. C, Vijay Tendulkar, Final Solutions. D, Girish Karnad, Yayati. On the one side, you have Indian playwrights. On the other side, we have plays written by them. One of the pairs is wrongly matched. So you have to find out that. I think if you don't know, sometimes you have to eliminate. I think you can eliminate D, Girish Karnad, because everyone knows. If you're aware of Girish Karnad, then you know Yayati was written by him, or Badal Sarkar, Ivam Indrajit. Sometimes when it comes to NET exam, you have to eliminate options, then you have to narrow down to 2. So if you have 2 options, Manjula Padmanabhan and Vijay Tendulkar, then you have to go for 1. Sometimes when it comes to competitive exams, you should cultivate an instinct for this kind of test. So let's say the answer is Vijay Tendulkar. Why? Final Solutions, the play was written by Mahesh Dattani. So if you're not aware of this, no problem at all. Take this as a starting point, then begin your preparation. Why don't you start reading about Badal Sarkar and Ivam Indrajit, or Manjula Padmanabhan and her play Harvest, or Vijay Tendulkar, or Mahesh Dattani, or Girish Karnad. So this can be an introduction to Indian literature, and you can start your preparation. Then novel. The epithet, the Napoleon of crime, refers to option A, Madame Defarge in Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities. B, Nurse Ratched in Ken Kesey's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. C, Professor Moriarty in Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes series. D. Lord Voldemort in J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter novels. So all are villains or antagonists. Who is called the Napoleon of crime? So let's check out the answer. C. Professor Moriarty in Doyle's Sherlock Holmes series. Moriarty is called the Napoleon of crime. So no problem. If you're not aware of this, no problem. Why don't you check out Dickens? Why don't you read this historical novel, A Tale of Two Cities? Or why don't you read Ken Kesey's classic, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which is considered a classic in American literature? Why don't you start with that? Or Doyle or Rowling? So this can be a starting point for your preparation on novel. Let's say prose. What are the names of Elia's children in Charles Lamb's essay, Dream Children? Option A, Tom and Maggie. B, Jem and Scout. C, John and Alice. D, Hansel and Gretel. So if you look at the logic in the options, you have brother-sister pair. And you're aware of this, if you're aware of this essay called Dream Children by Charles Lamb. Charles Lamb uses this pen name called Elia, and he imagines, he doesn't have children. He imagines, okay, there were children, and what are their names? Tom and Maggie, John and Alice, Jem and Scout, Hansel and Gretel. Answer C, John and Alice. So another thing, sometimes, if you don't know the answer, you find out, and after that you also should refer other options. For instance, option A, Tom and Maggie, famous characters, Tom and Maggie Tulliver, created by a Victorian novelist who used a pen name or pseudonym, Mary Ann Evans. Of course, yes. So it was written by George Eliot in Mill on the Floss. So in Mill on the Floss, we have these famous characters, Tom and Maggie Tulliver. Then you can also identify B, Jem and Scout from American literature, created by Harper Lee. Very famous author, Harper Lee, To Kill a Mockingbird. It's a classic. In this book, we have these two characters, Jem and Scout. Then we have Hansel and Gretel from fairy tale collected by the brothers Grimm. So this is how you have to connect. I would say, why don't you have a page, separate page for common things? Maybe you can say in your preparation, you can have a page on brothers and sisters in literature. So you have 4 pairs here. If you know some other pairs, why don't you put it there? So that's how you build on points. Linguistics. What is also called the voice box, which contains vocal cords? Option A, oral cavity. B, uvula. C, pharynx. D, larynx. So we have parts here. In one of these parts, in our throat, it contains the voice box. What is that? Oral cavity refers to the path, right? That cannot be the answer. Uvula, if you're aware, uvula is kind of a muscle that is hanging on. So if you look yourself in the mirror, open your mouth. So in deep, you see a muscle hanging, a kind of a appendage. So that is uvula. So, and look at option C and D, they look same. So that must be, one of these two must be the answer. Let's say the answer is D, larynx. So larynx is it in your neck? It's there. The voice box is there. It's called voice box. It has some vocal cords, which is responsible for producing sounds. Then why don't you check out pharynx? Or why don't you check out phonetics or phonology and start reading about phonology? Then you can move on to morphology, semantics, or applied linguistics. Then let's move on, theory. So if you like theory, here is a question for you. Which concept was proposed by the Swiss linguist Ferdinand de Saussure? Option A, paratext. B, bricolage. C, lang. D, interpolation. You can choose the answer. Yes, C, lang. So whenever you read about Swiss linguist Ferdinand de Saussure, you come across something called semiology, the field he put forward. Semiology, study of signs, and signifier, signified, Then you have lang, parole. So now if you are not aware of these terms, don't freak out. Why don't you check out this in the glossary we saw? We refer to a glossary for for theory. So take that glossary and look up this entry, lang, parole, or paratext, bricolage, or interpolation. All are major concepts in theories. So we have paratext by Gerard Genet and bricolage, Lévi-Strauss. We have interpolation by Althusser. So, okay, you know the author. Why don't you check out its meaning and its relevance and importance? So in sum, we are coming to the fag end of this webinar. Tips. Number 1, first, pick a genre. Poetry, drama, essay, anything for that matter. So once you pick a genre, revisit your UG and PG syllabus and read. 2, gather points about the topic, and you can go for this formula, the 1 to 10 formula. Then once you have a lot of points, why don't you share it with a group? And beware of this group. All should be contributors, not one should give and another should take away. So everything should contribute. Everyone should contribute. So work with a steady group. Then read the original. Now the questions are based on passages from a particular text. So you have to read the original, at least some major works. Then if you come across a term, definitely you should have examples for those terms. Then final, move across genres. So you have to jump from poetry to novel to theory, and again, front and forth. Okay, so this is how you can start your preparation from scratch. And final piece of advice, keep the preparation going. I would say this is the most important tip, in the sense, sometimes the result is not what we have expected. Sometimes the result is negative, but don't bother. In the sense, you have been preparing for the last 6 months, and now the result is not good, but do not stop your preparation. So this is the mistake many aspirants do. What they do, they stop their preparation after the result, if the result is negative. And they forget the exam for a few months, let's say 2 or 3 months. Again, there's a call for notification for another NET exam. Again, they start their preparation. What happens? Again, you start from the beginning. You don't go deep. You appear for the next exam, again the same result. So I would say, even if you have, if you do not score much in the first attempt, do not bother. Keep going. Like you have Sisyphus. So like Sisyphus, just keep the preparation going. Why? Because for the past 4 or 5 months or 6 months, you have been preparing. You are at a point, you're at a vantage, on a vantage. You are able to understand, everything, most of the concepts. You have to build on that. So if you take a break, then you will lose many things. So keep the preparation going, and that's how you can improve. So thank you so much for attending this webinar. And this is offered by Professor Academy, Chennai. So if you're interested in joining UGC NET or SET exams, English, you can contact this number on the screen, 755-0100-920. If you have any questions, you can ask. I will answer. So thank you so much, and follow all the tips. I hope you can also use the resources introduced in this webinar. All the best for your preparation.